Hi everyone. In this clip, we're going to go through our final steps to create our concept package. So one of the things that we may want to do that we're lacking here is how this compares to the character model itself. We can figure this out, but we could also resolve this here too. So I've got the image of our character model, and we can start to just grab this, copy it, and paste it into our scene. Now, we could also just grab the parts that we don't need, such as that background, and start to just kind of squeeze this down into something that is going to be a little bit more manageable for us. Now, what I am going to do as well is just give ourselves a little bit more space here and just sort of fill that back in. That's pretty good. So now here, what I'm going to do is just take my big main concept, my full concept here, drag it over by duplicating with Alt, and I'm just going to press Control E, which will collapse everything down. So then I'm going to just squeeze down the size of this piece here with Control Transform, put that on top, and we can start to see how this works. Now, it does seem like there's a little bit of extra space here that we don't need. In my concept, I'm just going to remove that. There we go. Get rid of that. Get rid of this. There we go. So now when I actually work with this, it's going to be in the proper size. So now we can kind of see how that works. Now I could scale this up if I wanted to see it being quite a bit larger, or if I wanted it to be really nice and tight and small in his hand. We can kind of see how that works. Doing this and adjusting this at any point during our process is very, very useful because it'll give us a good idea of what we're working with. Now I will add in a mask so I can kind of just paint out that section where his hand is and make sure that these parts fit properly. There we go. Let's go a little bit smaller here and squeeze this in so that it fits. There we go. Now we can get a pretty good sense of how this looks on the character. But stylistically, these things don't look like they fit. So what I like to do in this case is just use a bit of a filter. So I can go to our filter gallery, and for a stylized look, I can quickly just use the cutout filter. Now, in this case, it can be a little bit hard to see. Let's just zoom out. Oh, we're currently looking at the mask here. Let's just come back here. And again, filter, filter gallery. So we can see what we're working with here. Basically, it's just going to kind of do some big, broad leveling here of just some flat values. This is pretty good. I can go with some relatively simple edges. Adjust some of the fidelity. I think I'll still want to keep this pretty clear. There we go. And I just want to make sure that these values fit a little bit better. So I'm going to use a lighten layer, maybe set to something like this value. And I'm just going to set my brush to lighten, because basically what that'll do is, if I lock the transparencies here, I can just start to kind of use some of the same values as I have in the rest of my concept. Lighten will only affect the darkest values that are beneath the value level that I've got right now. So that works pretty well. I can just go into normal mode. With my brush strokes, I can set up just a couple of those extra details that got lost. And that works pretty decently. I could draw in some black lines on top as well, just to keep that style going, just to make sure that this looks really nice and consistent with the style that's already been established here. This will help kind of figure out if any parts don't quite fit, or if they don't look good together, or anything like that, and just kind of give a nice complete concept package. Not worrying about the details too much here, because at this point the idea has already been settled. I've already kind of figured out what I want to work with. I just want to work with something that's stylistically appropriate now. There we go. Just kind of refining some of those elements so we've got something that looks like it fits. This is just a nice setup to do, just to make sure that all of this will look like it goes together in some kind of interesting and cohesive way, and so that it's stylistically appropriate if your initial concept doesn't necessarily match the style 100% in its rendering. Always useful for another artist to see how that stuff fits the existing concept style. And it helps you kind of figure out if your design doesn't necessarily fit on its own. But you can see here, it definitely does. We could still adjust some of our values as well if we wanted to make sure that the blade was actually a little bit brighter or anything like that, so that it stands out nicely in contrast with the character itself. So that's pretty good. These things look like they fit and they go together really nicely. Now what's worth creating is specifically some orthograph images. These are useful for modelers, and it's very easy for us to create because we've already got our model. So let's just jump into ZBrush right here. Basically what we want to do is just take our image and get some orthograph imagery from it. Basically just straight on imagery. Make sure that perspective is not turned on so that everything looks flat and parallel with itself. We can just do some quick BPR renders and save them out as our appropriate image. So in this case, for example, let's just name this front. Then I can hold shift, and again, it's just going to lock to every single angle. We'll just do a BPR render again, pick this, and we'll just call this side. And we can call this BPR render back. Once that's done, we can load all of those up into Photoshop. So in Photoshop, with each of these pieces loaded, we can just drag them into the concept folder individually. Don't need to line them up or do anything fancy with them. Just delete the rest. And each part, I'll just kind of line up with the other ones. Just make sure that they're all visible. I'm actually just going to combine them together because I don't need them to be set up in any kind of fancy way. And I can just marquee select the black sections and delete them. So this works really well because now I've got these pieces set up from a model. This is very useful for a modeler. They don't have to follow this, but it took really no extra effort on my part to create this because I was already modeling it out anyways for structural reasons, but now the modeler has some extra clarification as to what the shape potentially could be or should be, and I could revise any of these concepts as I see fit as we go. So I could just start to change any of the structure if I started to think that that might look good. But the nice thing is generally speaking, when I've had to model off of a concept, especially orthographs, usually the orthograph is wrong. It's very hard and time-consuming and annoying as a concept artist to make an orthograph drawing. These orthographs basically just need to line up in every direction. Every single part needs to fit perfectly with each other. Every line needs to match up. And it's really, really time-consuming and annoying. So I find it much more effective to just have a 3D model to work off of as a modeler. Now, we could make the revisions that we've done here, so elements like this and this, we could start to incorporate back over here if we wanted to, but a 3D modeler is pretty smart. They're able to figure out what is already there and what isn't in the concept. You don't necessarily need to change and include all of those various parts. But now, there's something manageable to work with. I do want to adjust the values of this just a little bit more so that it's a little bit brighter and a little bit darker, just for clarity purposes. Let's just bring down the blackest values as well, just so that this stays nice and clear. And in this case too, just compositionally, let's switch up the structure of this so that it kind of has a rotation quality to that. So there we go. That's pretty good. This gives us a good indication of what the artist is going to need to work with when they go into the modeling stage on this piece. And now what I can basically do is just scale everything up here. There we go. So now all of this is nice and clean and structured, and the last thing that we can do is just add in a little bit of tagging so that it's clear what project this is for. And that's basically it. Everything's set up so that I can pass this off to a modeler. So now that we've finished this module, let's talk about what we've learned. We've learned how to composite things in Photoshop so that we can take our images from ZBrush and make them work for us as we do our final concept package. We've learned how to refine our final concept inside of Photoshop, and we've better understood how to create material callouts. And finally, we've figured out how to create an effective concept package so they'll understand what the structure of this is, they've got orthographs to work with, they've got how this should fit on a character model itself, and they've got some structural detailed callouts so they can figure out what the elements are and what the materials are so they can texture and finish this piece out. I hope you enjoyed this course on Weapon Concept Fundamentals.